Hola, First Gen. Before we begin today's episode, I wanted to take a moment to say thank you for being a listener of this podcast. I truly appreciate every single one of you, and I hope you know that my DMs are open should you ever have feedback or would like to share reflections you may have while listening. In this episode, we will be mentioning topics that may be triggering, so please take a moment to pause this episode if you do not want to hear the list of these topics. The topics mentioned are abortion, miscarriage, SA, and suicide ideation. Please be mindful of this and your own mental health before choosing to continue this episode. The reason I choose to include episodes that speak on these topics is because I think that raw, vulnerable conversations like these are very important, especially for those who may feel alone in what they are going through. Thank you for understanding, and let's go ahead and get started. Hola, you are listening to First Gen Healing, a podcast on Latinx healing and awakening journeys. My name is Priscila Luna. I am your host, and today's guest is Stephanie. So I'm going to let her introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Stephanie. My day job is I work in corporate finance, but then on my free time, I love posting on TikTok, and that's how Priscilla and I have connected. And I just post about my life, I post about my job, and yeah, so that's just a little bit about me. Oh, and I'm also Salvadorian.
Are you the eldest? You have siblings? Like, where are you in your family?
So my family is a little complicated because it's a blended family,
Okay.
but I am the third out of my siblings from like my parents, but I have a little brother who's like my stepbrother, so there's like four of us in total.
And then are both of your parents Salvadorian?
Yes, both of my parents are Salvadorian, but my stepdad is Cuban, so it's kind of like that added different culture there too.
Cool. Yeah. Did you get to did he cook for you at all ever?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Literally he used to cook so good. And then we've gone to Cuba too, so we've been able to like see what it's actually like and everything. So
wow, that's super cool. As you know, the podcast is about healing and awakening journeys. And like you mentioned, I follow you on TikTok. I feel like I know you already just because, you post about your job, your relationships, and also recently about like anxiety and all of that. So wondering if you resonate more with healing or awakening, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, so I feel like it's kind of both. Because I think in order to get on a path of healing, you kind of need to have that awakening moment. You have to have that self-awareness. And I know for me, my healing journey, it's been a long journey, but I feel like I haven't really put in the work until I finally like woke up and was like, hey, I need to make changes. Like I can't just like keep floating through life. So that's why I would say it's kind of both for me.
Mm-hmm. And when do you think those journeys or that journey, both of those journeys started for you?
Yeah. I think for me, where I actually like really recognize like, hey, I need to like, put in the work to work on myself. I think for me was not recently, well, with my last breakup, that was kind of, I think, the culmination of all the trauma that I have experienced in my life. And I felt like I kind of was just like packing it in, being like, oh, I'm okay. And then I was in a relationship for 5 years and then it ended. And for me, that was like devastating because I think, so just to give you guys a little bit of context going back in time, I grew up in a picture perfect childhood. My parents came here 30 plus years ago from El Salvador, but they started their own business and it was going pretty well for them, And so I was in private schools. Like it wasn't like a struggle other than like, you do have that first gen struggle where like my parents don't really speak English that very well. So like, and they would work a lot. But then when I was 12, my parents ended up splitting up and it wasn't like, oh, they split up and like, hey, co-parenting, every other weekend you see your dad, like my dad just disappeared. So it went from like my dad being my best friend to him like literally just disappearing. And then he would like come back every couple months or every couple years and be like, hey, I'm back, like, forgive me, blah, 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 blah. And then he would disappear again. So it was constantly like, I feel like abandonment. Well, it is abandonment. So it constantly would be like, hey, he would drop me off at school. And then I would go to school and he'd be like, oh, don't worry, I'll pick you up. And then like at the end, like when it was time for him to pick me up, he was nowhere to be found.
Oh,
yeah. Wow. And then it would just be like my mom picking me up and she'd be crying and like, the whole thing. So For me, I think like that's where the trauma like really started. And then I think from there, I found like happiness in relationships, you know? So like that
Mm.
attention that you wanted from your father. I started dating people when I was 14 and I had a boyfriend basically from the year 14 until now, you know?
Wow.
So I
Yeah.
became like a serial dater where it was like, oh, my boyfriend's going to fix my problems or make me feel more secure. And I knew people like throughout my life were like, hey, you should go to therapy, you should go to counseling. And I was like, nah, that's for crazy people. Like, I'm not doing that. Then eventually, you know, like in the last relationship that I was in, that was for 5 years. Towards the end of it, like, you know, we had our own issues. And then towards the end of it, my ex-boyfriend was like, I don't want to be in a relationship anymore. And that was like devastating for me. I was like,
Mm.
no, you can't leave, like, whatever.
Yeah.
Um, and then I actually, at the end of it, also was pregnant and ended up having a miscarriage. So that was even more devastating, right? And
Wow. Yeah.
I had a moment where it was the weirdest thing. It was like my body like shut down. Like we went on vacation. I woke up and I don't know if you know what deja vu is, where the day keeps repeating, or like you feel like you had a
Mm-hmm.
moment and you repeated it. So like I woke up and I could not, like I felt so out of it, so disassociated. I was like, what day is it? I was so confused. I was like, like I was
Oh.
asking my mom, I was like, I don't even know what day it is today. Like, is it Monday? Is it Tuesday? Like I was so out of it.
Mm.
And now like going through counseling and everything, people are like, my therapists have been like, that's like you disassociating because like you just had gone through too much and your body was just trying to protect you. And it said, you know what, we're going to shut down your mind. And after that happened, I was like scared. I was like, oh my gosh, like, am I like schizophrenic? Am I bipolar? I don't know. So that was the moment where I called a therapist and I was like, hi, like, I need help. I
Mm.
don't know what's going on. And that was really like the start of my healing journey and kind of taking back my own power. Yeah.
Okay, you've mentioned a lot, so let me think about
Yeah. There's a
let me
lot
think
in
about
there.
where to go. I think one question I have for you
Yeah.
is you mentioned like your parents splitting up. So I'm gonna take you back and then we'll go through the
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
things. I think, and I'm wondering like if at any point during those times of your life anyone sat with you and asked you how you were doing or explained to you
Ooh.
what was happening and hey, you might be having some feelings right now,
Yeah.
there's big things happening in your life. I'm wondering if that ever happened for you.
Honestly, that's I think where the problem was. I don't know if it's just my family, if it's Latino culture, but I feel like it's we don't talk about things. Like everybody likes to chambrear, but nobody likes to actually like deal with things. Or mental health is not something that we talk about. Um, and I know when that was happening, I was 12 years old. So of course I
Mm-hmm.
understand my mom was trying to shield me by not telling me that much. But like, how was my dad in my house one day and disappeared the next? You know.
Yeah, yeah.
So and even so I think that really affected me where I didn't want to talk about it too. I just shut down, you
Mm.
know.
Mm-hmm.
And I know like my family is very Christian, so like people from the church would come and be like, oh, we'll pray for you, and I'm like, yo, just leave me alone. Like
Mm.
I don't know what to do, and I didn't know how to handle those emotions.
Yeah.
And something that my therapist says now is like, hey, Stephanie, like, yeah, your dad abandoned you, but like your mom also abandoned you emotionally, you know.
Mm.
And so it's I think that that really did affect me, because I nobody talked to me about it. Nobody would tell me what was going on. I just kind of was sitting there like, I don't know what's going on. And now
Yeah.
our family has changed, and I just got to figure it out, you know. So
Yeah, your whole life. Yeah, the reason that I ask about that is because I think that that's what I've kind of noticed is similarly like looking back, and it's so interesting because you started off the conversation like I had a picture perfect childhood,
yeah.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I feel like in a way we also brush off the things that happened to us
Yeah.
because there was no like period in time where it was acknowledged that we also went through difficult periods, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, for example, I was thinking back to growing up, like my caretakers or my babysitters, pues. I don't know. I called them like mom and dad, but I also had a mom and dad. So my full, like very babysitters that I spent a long time with because my
Mm-hmm.
parents worked a lot. Their daughter, I don't think I've ever mentioned it, but when I came into their lives, like she had started to lose the ability to walk. Like she was like in the stage where she could walk, but she started falling. And
Mm-hmm.
so as a child, I was like 4. this didn't happen, like this remembering didn't happen until I went to therapy and started like remembering stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But now, like one of my most triggering memories is remembering her falling in the shower
Mm-hmm.
and like her mom coming and screaming and me like witnessing, and and her mom
Yeah.
didn't drive. So it was like this big thing of like, it was the beginning of something big for them.
Yeah.
But thinking back, no one ever sat me down and was like, hey, you're witnessing some hard stuff, like you're
Yeah.
being a part of some big stuff. So now I think I'm like curious, like, I wonder if anyone did get that type of conversation like in their families. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think it's not just your family. Like, it's probably, yeah, like a, I don't know if a community wide thing, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think the way that people get through a lot of hard stuff maybe is by not talking about it.
I
Yeah.
feel like sometimes people, like the adults in the room, think, hey, we're protecting them by not saying anything. But it's like, you're not protecting us by not saying anything, because then we have these emotions, these traumas that we don't know how to handle. And like trauma
Yeah.
really affects you. And it's, that happened when I was 12 and now I'm 26. 14 years later, I'm still like dealing with it. So,
Yeah, and processing.
yeah.
And I think you mentioned another really interesting thing that I've been learning about too, which is it's easier to pinpoint the parent that maybe was absent or like kind of stands out more, right? So
Yeah.
in this instance, your dad.
Yeah.
But it's super interesting that like in a way, and I think it's not like a blame game, it's more like an understanding, right?
Yeah.
Like why do I feel this way? But in a way, like your therapist saying your mom also kind of abandoned you
Hmm.
emotionally, let's say.
Yeah.
That's such an interesting subject, I think, right? Like,
Yeah.
because we don't think of it that way. It's like, no, my mom did everything for me. She stayed, she provided. How have you maybe processed that? Like, because I'm assuming you're closer with your mom at
Yeah.
this time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Me and my mom are super close. Um, and it comes with, my parents splitting. It comes with being first gen and her not speaking perfect English, translating the documents, making the appointments, making the calls. Ay, hija, ponete en el teléfono, decir que soy yo y decirle que quieres una cita or something like that.
Yeah.
Um, but how do I process, like, for me, when my therapist told me that, because me and my mom are very close, but we also like kind of butt heads sometimes.
Mhm.
Um, and when she said that to me, because sometimes I feel like not heard by my mom, like I feel like she just kind of like, I don't know, it's like weird. And when my therapist said that to me, I was just like, that is so mind blowing because it's so true. Like I was young, and now as an adult, I definitely have a lot more sympathy for my mom because, like, for example, I went through this breakup and everything and I felt heartbroken, got depressed. So I can only imagine after a 20-year marriage, your
Mhm.
husband walking out, leaving you with 3 kids and leaving you with a business and leaving you with, like, we went to private school. So my mom had to pay her tuition, like,
Yeah.
so like
Wow.
leaving her with everything. So I can only imagine how hard that was for her. So I think now I sympathize a little bit more. Um, but I also think that me and her have a lot to like work through when it comes to, sometimes I don't know how to say it, like I think we have a lot to work through with her recognizing her own faults and just, I guess, like not being emotionally unavailable or like victimizing herself.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you feel like it's kind of surface level in a way with her?
We're deep, but I feel like getting her to understand mental health is very difficult. So when I first
Mm,
started going to therapy, she was like, "What? Why are you going to therapy?" She's like, "That's crazy." And again, like I come from a Christian household. All you need to do is pray.
yeah.
And for her, it was really hard to accept it, but she has seen how much it has helped me. And now even she has been like, you know what? Maybe I need to go to therapy. And I'm like, yeah, mom. So yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Oh, super interesting. Yeah, I had a like a healing session with someone, and it was like to get to the root of certain stuff,
Hmm.
and it was intense because it's like energy work,
Hmm.
but that's what came from it. It's because like in my instance it's very easy to pinpoint, like in my instance my mom was the breadwinner and my dad wasn't,
Hmm.
and she was kind of like the dad in a way. She was really strict, and I felt like my dad was the nurturer, right? So like he kind of provided safety ish.
Mm-hmm.
He was like nicer, let's say,
Yeah.
growing up. And she, like the healer pointed out, or we got to the bottom of, in a way, you don't not only feel not seen by your mother, but also your father, because he didn't
Mm-hmm.
defend you, right? Like he didn't stand up for you. He didn't like help you process or anything. So in that, like there's also that like unspoken abandonment, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
even though you feel like he's closer to you or was
Yeah.
closer to you in that time.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, super interesting that you kind of have also come across a similar breakthrough,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah, it's so interesting because it's the same kind of dynamic. My mom was always, and she still is, very headstrong, always the leader. She's like that girl boss. She's been running this business for 20 years. And my dad
Mm.
was a lot more the nurturer. He was the one who would take us to school, make us pancakes in the morning, cook.
Yeah, me
My mom
too.
never cooked, you know.
Yeah, same.
So the
Wow.
dynamic is very, very interesting. But yeah, I can definitely relate to
Hmm.
that.
I think, what one thing that maybe we can talk about a little bit and you can
Yeah.
tell me what you think about is one thing I've been thinking about is the more I go into my healing journey and I realize how hard it is to process and face things,
Hmm.
as much as I want my parents to go to therapy, I like abandoned that struggle. I let them
Hmm.
not go. I was like, okay, I'm gonna heal myself. But I, of course, in the back of my head, I'm always like, oh, I wish they did. But to
Yeah.
be honest, I feel like I wonder if unearthing all of these really hard things that they went through, like, would make them different in a negative way, or would
Mm.
like somehow like not help them, because I think, I don't know. I guess sometimes I think maybe what I've gone through is not as hard as what they've gone through. And so maybe
Mm.
that's why it's a bit easier for me to like look in the direction of my pain as opposed to them. I don't know.
Yeah. I I think I'm a big advocate that I think everybody needs to go to therapy. And like even though like for example, I didn't have to go through what my parents did. Like they crossed the border. My dad dropped out of school when he was in middle school and then he crossed the border here and then he would go back in the day it was easier, right? So he would go back and forth
Mm-hmm.
between the States and El Salvador. And then eventually my mom came and like even when she tells me the story of her crossing the border, like she like cries, because it was very traumatizing for her. But
Yeah.
I I just think that I think they would be better people if they were able to uncover, like I think they would just have more power over their life, if they were able to
Mm,
uncover a lot of the traumas and things that they've gone through. Because instead they just say, oh well, like we got to work, like my mom
yeah.
works all the time, and instead
Yeah.
of doing self-care and my sister got her like a spa certificate so she could go to the spa. And my mom's like, "Oh, I don't have time for
Oh my God,
that." You know?
girl, dude, it's so funny the similarities because yeah, me too. I've bought in my mom massage like gift cards. Y
Yeah.
están ahí in the cajon. Like when I go visit her, I'm like, Mom, give them to me.
I know, like literally my mom, because I love traveling, and my mom used to give me the side eye because she'd be like, "You're wasting too much money. Why are you doing that?" And my
Mm,
mom's like, "Ah, siempre te vas en viaje y nunca me vas a llevar." I'm like, even if I wanted to take you, like I have offered to take her before. She's just like, "Oh, I don't have time. I don't have time. I gotta work." So
yeah. So you then mentioned something super cool, which is taking back my power.
mm.
And that's kind of like I want to coin the term inner poder, that's kind of
Yeah,
what I
that's a
mentioned.
good
I'm like
one. Put it on a
and
t-shirt.
yeah, so and I feel like that's the juiciest part of even
Mm,
like what I've been doing in coaching and stuff. It's like, man, when people reach the point where they understand what that feels like in them or like within their world, it
yeah,
can shift so much.
yeah.
So maybe can you walk me through like what this last year or like couple of years have been like? Like maybe has there been different stages of it or how has it
Mm.
like felt?
Yeah, so I think for me right now, like I said, taking back my power has been so important because, like I said, my dad left. When I was younger, I was sexually abused, and all those
Mm.
things. Like, this is the first time me actually saying that out loud. Like, I've told like maybe 2 or 3 people, but this is like me saying it on a platform, so that's kind of crazy. I got Bell's palsy where half of my face was paralyzed, so it felt like I never could catch a break, and I always felt like,
Mm.
oh, this person hurt me, that person hurt me, this is why I'm this way, that's why I'm that way, which it does affect you. But something that I like to say is, I think that by me trying to control everything, instead of me controlling everything, I was allowing everything to control me.
Mm.
And so with this past relationship, I think was the really big culmination of everything. Um, Unfortunately, it was a little toxic. And like I said, both people in the relationship had wrong. Like, I was wrong, he was wrong. So I don't like to put the blame on anybody. But there was a lot of gaslighting, a lot of me starting to feel stir crazy where I was like, no, like, am I right? Am I wrong? I don't know.
Mm.
And I felt like I just lost my power and I lost my voice. Um, and even like at the end of it, I just felt, I remember when the breakup happened, when I miscarried and everything, I just felt so numb and so empty. And like, I just felt like devastated and like I was in a hole. And being in such a low point is something that I never ever want to go through. Like, I never want to allow anybody else to have control over me. And I don't want anybody to be able to affect me to that point that I feel depressed or even like have suicidal ideations. Like, it's not worth it. You know, like when I was in the moment, I was like, oh, like worth is like life is worthless. And, you know, I felt like by losing one individual, like my life was over. But now
Yeah.
that it's been like over a year and, you know, life has moved on, I'm just like, Stephanie, never allow that to happen. Because I think that now, by taking back my own power, taking back my voice, having boundaries, having self-respect, now I feel kind of like a superhero in the sense that nobody can affect me. Like, if something happens to me, it's because I allow it. You know, it's not because I'm allowing this person to tell me that I don't have a voice or that I can't speak or, you know. So that's why I think for
Yeah.
me, taking back my power was really important, because I felt in that past relationship that I didn't like, my voice didn't matter. And as much as I would
Yeah.
say things or say like, hey, you should change this or you should change that, or maybe we should do this, like, I was always just kind of put down. So I think that's why
Mm-hmm.
getting my voice back was really important.
Yeah. So unfortunate that some of us have to really get to like that rock bottom, right?
Yeah.
Like where it's kind of like you lose sense of yourself, of your
Hmm.
world. How did you, was it kind of just through therapy? Was that the main like piece of the puzzle for you to start like reclaiming your voice, or was there other aspects that you also changed in the midst of it?
I think for me, it was mainly therapy is really what gave me like coping mechanisms, helped me redefine how I saw myself, because my self-esteem was
Mm.
literally zero. Like, I was like, how could my ex leave me? Like, we were together for 5 years, we were supposed to get married, like, and
Mm-hmm.
then when they are like, no, I don't want to be with you, you know, and then they go off and do whatever they want to do, then you think like, wow, like, I'm not good enough, like I wasn't enough,
Mm.
you know, like, why, like, now they want to change, oh, now they want to be a better person, but why didn't they want to be a better person for me, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think therapy really helped me identify those fake value, like fake core beliefs that I had about myself, like, oh, I'm not good enough, I'm not cool, I'm not this, I'm not that. And it's like, no, you are good enough, you are cool. Like,
Yeah.
you are everything that you want to be, you know. And that's really what helped me gain my like voice back. And even like to this day, I still like, I feel a lot more powerful, but there's days where I have to like go stand in front of the mirror and be like, Stephanie, you're pretty, Stephanie, you're this, you know, like, have to like go
Mm.
give myself affirmations.
Yeah.
um but I think therapy is really what helped me discover that.
Ooh, wow. Super powerful. I think like that journey is so beautiful. Like you said, you kind of feel like a superhero because I
Yeah.
think you gain something that maybe we didn't have. Like we probably had access to our whole lives. We were just never taught how to like
Hmm.
tap in, right, into
Yeah.
that piece of us.
Yeah, yes. I think just having control, because I used to feel so out of control. When I first started therapy, that's what I used to tell them. I'd be like, I feel out of control. Like I feel like I don't have control over my life. I don't know what to do. I don't like, you know, and I think just getting that control back has made me be in such a better place.
Yeah. And would you say that it took you facing the things that you went through to get that control back, or were you
Mm.
able to bypass them and still get it back?
Ah, you know, a lot of the things I went through were pretty painful, and honestly, I wouldn't wish it on anybody. But I do think that life is a journey, and if you don't go through those lows, then you'll never like experience the highs. So I do think that I had to go through that, and I had to get to like literal zero, not have like I had to be in a hole to figure out like, hey, I need to get out of this, you know, or not, then I
Mm,
would have passively just gone through life probably and never seeked help or looked to heal myself or anything.
mm. Yeah, I think that's always such a like I don't know. I think it's always a question in my mind because when you get into like spirituality and mindset and stuff, it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like that saying of everything happens for a reason, right?
Yeah.
But then
Yeah.
when I start learning about all of the really difficult things that people had to go through, it just it's so much harder to say that in my opinion,
Yeah.
like
No, it is.
yeah, like how could it be for a reason? These are things that are just seem, I don't know, cruel,
Yeah.
But it always surprises me that most of the people that I speak to that have gone through really difficult things, as some of the ones you've mentioned, they in a sense find in them to like reframe what they've gone through,
Mm.
and find
Mm-hmm.
strength in that. And I
Yeah.
think that's so powerful and beautiful. And it's just like, I don't know, it breaks my heart wide open because I'm like, wow, like, yeah, it must be
Yeah.
so, I don't know. It's a lot of emotions, I'm assuming.
Yeah. I do think that one thing is important is reframing. But then two, like for example, when I miscarried and the reaction that my ex had during that time and how he handled the situation opened my eyes. Because if that would have never
Mm,
happened, I probably would have still been like begging for him back, you know?
yeah,
But with
yeah,
me going through that situation and him not being there for me, it opened my eyes to be like, Stephanie, he's not going to be there for you. Like in the future when something worse happens, like
yeah.
is he going to be there for you? So I do also kind of think that I do say everything happens for a reason, because I know if that wouldn't have happened, I probably would have just have stuck around, you know, trying to make things
Hmm.
work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And through therapy, like, did you have to process each of the things, or is it like more forward facing? Because I think everyone has a different journey with therapy.
Yeah.
But for example, one of the things that my mom always says is like, pero yo no quiero pensar en esas cosas, like yo no quiero, like,
Yeah.
and the way I explain it to her, it's like, mom, es como si tienes like una bolsa de basura, right?
Uh-huh.
Y la
Uh-huh.
escondes en tu closet. And you're like, no, no huele, ahí no va a oler, And I'm like, but the house
True.
stinks.
Yeah.
And
That's
then
a good
I was
one.
like, so therapy will help you like take out the bag, look at what's
Yeah.
in there, throw it away.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, yo no quiero ver esas cosas.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering, like, for you, like, did you have to kind of take out the bag to look at what's there and move forward, or were you able to
Mm-hmm.
just bypass?
No, I definitely, and even still to this day, we're still unpacking a lot. um,
Mm,
and I think I'm not gonna make it seem like therapy's all dandelions and butterflies, because there's plenty of days I have skipped some weeks. There's days where I just get anxious and I'm like, I don't want to talk about this, you know, like I don't want
mm,
to open it up.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, I've had to unpack every single thing, and we're still not done. We're still working on it, but I do think that it's important to at least dig into all of those things, because I think it just I know I post about it, and I'm just such a big advocate for it, because I used to just like struggle in relationships, struggle with friendships, and I'd be like, why is this so out of control? Like, why do I make like
mm,
a really good friend and then I lose that friendship? But I just love how therapy has opened up my mind to see how I interact with other people, how they might perceive how I am, and they just, maybe I'm a very blunt person, and maybe being very blunt is not good, and I can't just live my
mm,
whole life being like, no, no, I want to do what I want to do. So as much as therapy sometimes can be hard to unpack everything, but I do think it's very helpful.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing because I think it's important for some people that may be on the cusp of like, should I go or not or what,
Yeah.
you know? Like, I think it is, no, I don't know if it's easier, but it's likely like more comfortable to be like, no, that's for crazy people. No, that's not going to help me, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, but definitely I think like when you're willing to face it, I mean, the gift is your voice. The gift is your power at the end of the day,
Exactly.
and that's so, so powerful. And let me see, what direction should we go here?
Let me know.
Let's see. I think first, I just want to thank you for like mentioning some of the really hard stuff. And I know you've
Mm,
also been opening up to that on social media. How has
mhm.
that been for you? Like, has that been what you expected it to be, maybe? Or did you not have any expectations?
Um, for me, opening up on social media it can be difficult. I do feel like I am a little bit more of an open book type of person, but at the same time, I do know it's not just strangers who follow me. There's family members,
Mm,
there's friends. And by me opening up, I'm sure some of them are sharing them and talking over there about it, and sometimes I do worry because I guess sometimes I don't want to disappoint people and be like, wait, hold up, what happened? Like I said, I come
mm,
from a very Christian community. Oh, you were pregnant? What? What were you doing? Like you're not supposed
mm,
to be doing that. And I know that when it all happened, my mom was like, we're not going to tell anybody. We're keeping this quiet. We're not talking about it. But I know for me, all of that journey, everything that I've gone through brought me to such a low point where, if I'm being really honest, if I got zero help, and I say this very genuinely, I don't know if I would still be on this earth because I was very, very depressed. And like,
yeah,
I really thought like the best option was like out. I was just like, I don't want to wake up. And I was like, oh, the best
wow,
option for me to not be here anymore. And after going through all of that, if my story will help somebody or help somebody to not make a decision like that, then I think it's worth it. And I don't care if somebody judges me or thinks, oh, look at what Stephanie did or whatever. Like, I don't care.
yeah,
I think it's important because life is hard, and on social media we all like to be like, get ready with me, or like, this is my day, and like, today I did an aesthetics oatmeal and with a straw. Like, no, like literally I roll out of bed. Like, that's why I don't even do day in my life, because it's not aesthetic and it is hard, and we are so used to being on social media and seeing everything be picture perfect, but it's not. And people are
yeah,
really struggling. And I know for me, it's not that I was alone. I had friends and family, but I started to isolate myself more and more and more. And so I thought I was alone.
yeah,
And even with posting, like the response, and like I get DMs of people telling me the hard things that they're going through. And like I had one individual reach out and be like, I put up a video on YouTube about my miscarriage. And she was like, hey, like I just went, like, literally her story was identical. She had a miscarriage around the same time. And she kind of had the same situation happen to her. Her boyfriend left, all of this stuff. And she was just saying how much she's struggling. So that's
mm,
why I think for me, it was nerve wracking, but I think that it's helping somebody out there. And I think that's
yeah.
important.
And I think you mentioned judgment a couple of times, and that's one of the things that frustrates me because I'm like, man, people are struggling, and the first thing they receive from family, usually not friends, is
Hmm.
judgment.
Yeah.
Like, how it just makes me mad because, like, you're at your lowest point or at a low point, and your family's worried about your reputation or
Yeah.
their reputation. And I feel like when I was at my rock bottom, like you said, I kind of started isolating myself, and it was kind of just like me in my apartment.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing is, I feel like probably you and I looked from the outside in like nothing was wrong
Yeah.
in terms of like good career, right? And just like
Hmm.
look well, and it's like, oh, they're doing great.
Yeah.
Which that's kind of scary too. Like I
It
think that
is.
scared me too. Like no
Yeah.
one really knows,
Exactly.
and yeah. And that's
Yeah.
probably likely for some people out there too. And what was kind of upsetting to me, but it does give you your power, is like in my lowest lows, my mom was still providing criticism of like what she thought I wasn't, the
Mm.
expectations I wasn't meeting that she wanted, right? Like,
Mm.
you don't hang out with me enough. You're not like yourself. You're not, but it wasn't like empathy, like, hey,
Yeah.
what the heck is going on? It was more like upsetness, anger, while
Hmm.
you can't take any more of that. Like, you're kind of at your wit's end.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that's crazy that, like, you and a lot of people that I speak with, that's what happens. Like, it's kind of like, instead of getting support, we get judgment, or kind of we
Mm.
feel like, well, let me hide this from them too because I don't want,
Yeah. I don't
their
want to bother
opinion.
them. They might be like, okay, she's still sad, like get over it,
Mm,
you know?
yeah.
So I definitely agree. And like my family has been very supportive, but I think you just get into your mind and you just start to isolate yourself and you be like, oh, you start to tell yourself like, oh, they don't, they think bad of me, they or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, like my mom the other day, she's like, Stephanie, you've been doing really well this week. You're not sad at all. That's good. Keep it up. And I know she means it in the best way, but sometimes I'm just like, so
Yeah.
yeah, I definitely get you on that.
I think that's the hard part of, like, that's where the lack of, like, maybe emotional immaturity on the part
Mhm.
of our families, that's where it
Yeah.
hurts us most because they don't know how to deal with people going through that.
Yeah.
Um, Even like, so I know you've been talking too about anxiety and depression, and
Hmm.
I think, like, at least for me at my rock bottom, I didn't want to go out. I didn't want to, like, see people. I didn't start
Hmm.
going to family things.
Hmm.
And again, instead of kind of like worrying, it was more like, well, it's their birthday. Why aren't you going to go for their birthday? They're your padrinos, or,
Mm.
whatever. There was like
Hmm.
always a reason to make me feel bad, not
Hmm.
like support. Like, did you have to deal with that in your journey?
Um, I think it was more probably from friends versus family.
Mm, okay.
So my mom, like I said, she's very supportive and God bless her heart because sometimes I do get super like anxious and then I get in these moods and I'm like super sad and then I like lash out at people. And my mom literally she's just like, she's just upset. She'll come around. Like so my mom doesn't really like say anything. But I would say more from friends. I think I dealt with a lot of anxiety, especially after college, because I was very, school oriented. I loved school. So I went
Mm,
to school, I got my college degree, then I did my master. So I always had the next step. And then when that
yeah.
ended and it was like, okay, now you got to figure it out, I was like, oh my gosh. And then like just coming back home, I went away to college. So then when I came back home, it was like, okay, I don't really have friends here. Now I need to remake friends. And like all of that, just the social anxiety and everything just started to build up. And for me, um, a lot of the times my ex was the one who would calm me down. Like he was the one who would control my
Wow.
anxiety. You know what I mean?
Mm,
So it kind of becomes like an addiction and like a drug where I need him to make me feel okay. So that's why
mm,
for me, the breakup was so devastating because I was like, I'm anxious now. And I like for 5 years, you've calmed me down and now you're not there anymore. So
yeah.
what do I do? And that started to I feel like bleed into my friendships and it not I think it did bleed into my friendships where I would be anxious or depressed and I didn't want to go out, like my friends would be like,
Mm,
let's go out, it's the weekend, blah blah blah, like come meet us, and I'd be like, no, I don't want to. And instead of
mm,
like trying to seek community, I would just isolate myself more and more. And sometimes it's not that friends mean to do this, but they're just like, why she doesn't want to go out? Like
yeah.
why doesn't she want to do this? Why is she being moody? And friends aren't family. Families will forgive you for everything, but friends will be like, okay, all right, we're not friends anymore. And I
Mm,
did lose friendships like the years after college, and now I lost friendships with people where I would act out or like my depression would be too much, and then people they didn't know I was depressed because it's not like I was telling them. I would just
yeah.
act very like this to them.
Mm,
And so I did lose a lot of friends. So I feel like that's kind of where I saw that where people didn't have empathy, but it's not because it wasn't like, oh, she's depressed, I don't want to be her friend. It's more like I
right.
isolated myself and they just didn't know what was going on.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I don't think most people are doing it out of ill will. I don't know about your ex, but I mean, honestly, even him, I don't know. I feel like people are really stuck in their own trauma, right? And they're just acting
Yeah.
out and living out like their own kind of story.
And I
But
also would like to say that it was never his responsibility to take care of my trauma or my anxiety. You know what I mean? So a
Yeah.
lot of the times I would lash out, I would get crazy, I would get upset, I would be nagging, I'd be like mad at him, and he'd be like, "Why are you starting another fight?" You know? So
Mm.
I also say it's not other people's responsibilities to, like, I needed to deal with that on my own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think also something worth mentioning is when you start to heal, you see that you're the common denominator in all aspects of your life, right?
Yes.
Speaking about, because I think you mentioned like your journey has been just recognizing that at some point you kind of had like the victim mentality, or it was kind of life is happening to me.
Yeah.
I think that powerful switch of recognizing like, likely, yes, there's an aspect of that, but also we're the common denominator in every aspect. And
Yeah.
so, whatever we like, you can call it a vibe, you can call it a trauma, whatever we put out is like also part of what we get back, right? Like,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Have you seen it now translate now that you are doing the work, let's say? How has that translated in the other aspects?
Yeah, so I think for me, a big issue was I had like issues with boundaries, or like I'm a very anxious attachment style. So if like you were my friend and you were like, "Hey, you made plans with me and then you canceled," I'd be like, "Well, they don't like me, or maybe they think I'm weird," or like I would
Mm,
make up these scenarios in my head, and then I would shut down to protect myself and then push friends away because I'm like, "Oh, if I push them away, they can't hurt me." I think for me, my relationship, so I do have a new boyfriend now. And I have been reconnecting with my friends and my family. And I think now that I realize, hey, there's things that I did wrong, or like there's insecurities that I had that caused me to act out, or, that type of stuff. I feel like now I can connect with my friends a lot better because I'm not making these assumptions of, oh, they don't like me, or they said this one
mhm.
thing. Or even with my boyfriend, I'm not picking fights because I'm just like being like, oh, why didn't you hold the door for me? Like those crazy things where I'm just like, Stephanie, calm down. I think I'm just a lot more self-aware of
Mhm.
myself. And hey, if somebody does something, guess what? It's not going to affect me. Like, yes, of course, things affect you. You get a little sad here and there, but it's not going to affect me to the point where you're going to go berserk and act out and, do things that are unlogical. So I definitely think that it just has brought a lot more happiness back into my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did it like ever impact your work going through these
Oof.
phases? Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. So I worked at a place for 3 years. That place was great. I loved the job. It was great. And then I ended up moving to New York City because my ex-boyfriend is from New York City. I moved up to New York and I started working at a company. And it one I when I was there, I had the miscarriage and I literally just couldn't work.
Mm,
Like, the thing is, I didn't realize that that's not that you have to share with people, but people would understand. Instead, I just kept it to myself, and that really affected my performance. And my boss would be like, why aren't you following up on stuff? Like, why aren't you completing stuff? And then that created this weird relationship between me and my boss where she didn't trust me because, of course, I wasn't getting stuff done. So then she was like micromanagement, And then
yeah.
I absolutely did not like working there anymore because, eventually when I was able to get on my feet again, at this point, they already think like, yo, this girl sucks,
Mm,
you know?
wow. Yeah.
Um, so I definitely think it affected me work wise. Now I feel so much more motivated to work. Like, it's hard. You work from home. Sometimes you want to be lazy, but I do feel a lot more motivated, a lot more excited, and not, I think just like depression, anxiety, and all that could really affect the workplace.
Yeah. Oof. I don't know if you know, but I actually left. So I come from like an HR background. That was my
Okay.
corporate life.
Woohoo! I
And
love HR.
and I did that for 8 years,
Wow.
and I disliked how in HR sometimes you had to disregard people's real true lives,
Yeah.
to be honest. There are policies that, like, for example, bereavement leave or FMLA, different types of things
Hmm.
like that. But for example, when we went through the pandemic, um, people were passing away, right? And we would get calls of like, hey, my whatever, like close relative felt like my son, my father, my like that. It was kind of like this crazy thing.
Yeah.
And what was crazier to me is that it was kind of like, okay, you have 3 days and then you're expected to come back to work.
Mm-hmm.
And like, even just hearing your story, like, of course there's going to be performance issues. Like, of course, there's
Yeah.
big stuff happening. And I bet, like, even as understanding as sometimes managers could be, like, there's kind of like, well, we need to get this
Yeah.
project done. There's deadlines and stuff. And
Yeah.
so I hated how like transactional, that life kind of can get in the
Mm-hmm.
corporate world.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know for me, like when I left that job, they wanted to do an exit interview. So then I was like, okay, I'll do an exit interview. And they were like, hey, what can we do better? Like, why are you leaving? And I was like, honestly, me and my manager didn't really I don't feel like we clicked very well. And they were like, why? And of course, I wasn't going to say, oh, I was depressed and blah, blah, blah. So I was just like, oh, like, I don't feel, and I honestly, I don't feel like I received proper training or like onboarding. So that just kind of snowballed into like me not knowing a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And I told the lady that, and I was like, yeah, I don't feel like there's enough training. She was like, what do you mean? And I was like, they didn't really like teach me very well. And then she's like, so you needed more hand holding. And I was like, no.
Oh
I
my
was like, I needed
God.
to be able to ask questions and not be yelled at. That's what I needed. But
Yeah.
it's definitely crazy in corporate sometimes.
Ooh, I don't miss it. I don't miss it at all. Oh, exit interviews were like, for me, like the dumbest thing to do. Like, why are we
Yeah.
doing this? And
Hmm.
HR managers love to be like, you guys, we need to do an exit interview for every single person. And I'm like, our company is shitty. So stop asking me to ask people if our company is shitty. Like, what the hell? So
Yeah.
annoying. Oh, man.
That's too
But
funny.
anyways, back to back to you. So, what was like your support system? So, we've talked about how sometimes friends and family not all of the people know how to deal with what we're going through,
Yeah.
but like maybe what did hold you? Like once you took that first step to seek help, what was your
Hmm.
support system like, or what like helped get you through each day? Because those times I think are really hard.
Yeah. So I think it was a combination of things. Like I said, my mom was a little not on board at the beginning, but then when she started to see how it was helping me, and I think when she saw, because she was there when I was disassociating that bad for that whole week,
Mm,
I think she got scared and she was like, okay. So I think my mom was like my mom, my family, they were really good support systems. And then like my current boyfriend now, is also he's literally amazing. He is so kind. He's it I give him props because if I'm being really honest, I moved on a little too fast. Like
mm,
we broke up. I broke up with my ex. It was like a couple months and I already was in another relationship. And I'm being honest, it was too fast. But and so I had so much trauma and so much pain that I was dealing with,
yeah.
but he was so supportive through all of it, and he always was like validating my feelings and telling me like, hey, like what you feel is okay. I think definitely all of that combined was a really great support system for me. And then for me, I also recently just have been like reconnecting a lot with my faith. Basically, my therapist told me that I need to ground myself not in other people, but in myself and things that are never going to change. So for me, it's like, okay, I ground myself in myself and I ground myself in my faith. And that's like what helps like me think that when everything's going crazy, at least I have that. My mom's a very devout Christian, and sometimes she was like pushing it down my throat, like, Stephanie,
Mm,
just pray. You need to do this. You need to do that. Like, she says her dream is to see all of us go to church with her.
mm.
So sometimes I feel like that actually repelled me, like, where I was like, I don't want to go. Like, I've been going my whole life. Now I don't want to. Um, but I think every person has their own faith journey, whatever they end up believing in. But I think if you do find faith, I do feel like it just helps you. It just, at least for me, it just has helped me to really just kind of feel at peace and know that whatever happens, like it is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it allows, I think I like to see it like co-creative in a way, you know,
Hmm.
it's kind of like not all on me
Yeah.
and not all on Faith, like it's kind of
Yeah.
both.
Exactly. I
Yeah.
agree.
So with that being said, how are you currently doing? I don't usually ask that, but I guess, you know,
Ah.
speaking about how are you currently
Yeah.
feeling? Yeah.
I honestly, I can say I am feeling really good. And I'm not even saying that to be like, oh, I gotta act good right now. Like, no, I am feeling really empowered. I'm feeling merciful towards myself in the sense like I'm allowed to give myself grace. Hey, not every day is gonna be perfect. Some days things are still gonna be sad, you know, like if I need to cry about something, I can go into the room and cry about it, but I'm not gonna allow that to affect the rest of my day, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think I feel really powerful right now. I feel really good, and I just, ooh, it's crazy to say I feel happy, which I feel
Mm,
like I haven't been able to say that in a while. So I'm very thankful that at least right now I'm really good.
yeah. Oh, that makes me happy.
Yay!
Well, thank you so, so much for sharing all of that. And I'm going to ask you to share like where people can follow you,
Oh
especially
yes.
now they know kind of like the bird's eye view of the journey. But I know
Yeah.
you've been, you know, been very open in your social media about like more of the details and the timelines and all of that. So
Yeah.
where can people continue to follow your journey?
So you can follow me on TikTok where I'm most active at They Call Me Stephanie 96. That's also the same username on Instagram. And then I also have a YouTube channel, which is They Call Me Stephanie. So you
Mm,
can find me on all three platforms there.
beautiful. And just to recap, you share about like what are the things that you share about?
Yeah, so this might sound a little self-centered, but the niche of me. But no, I just really share about so many different things that I've gone through, like Bell's palsy. I have Sjogren's syndrome, working in corporate finance as a first gen, and just kind of my life. So I just really like, I try to keep it as authentic as I can and just share everything that kind of goes on.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. I'll also leave your information in the description.
Awesome.
Um, so the next section is the resources section.
Ooh, uh-huh.
And the point of it is for people that maybe follow your story and resonate with certain aspects of it are like,
Hmm.
okay, well, what are the things that helped you in addition to therapy,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So our first question here is, what is your favorite healing or mindful tool?
Yeah, so for me, I think a great tool is journaling. And why I like journaling a lot is because you can literally put your thoughts on paper and look at it and be like, hey, is this logical or is it not? And also just getting your feelings out on paper has been really great for me. So I really do enjoy journaling.
What is a habit that you do for yourself every single day?
Ooh, I'm really bad at habits and doing things consistently, but I will say that what I try to do at least is wake up, look in the mirror, and do like self affirmations and tell myself what I should believe about myself and not,
Hmm.
and like kind of defunking the false things that I've made myself believe through my life.
What is a favorite song to listen to when you need like a pick me up or to feel inspired?
Hmm. So for me, I would say it is a Christian song. It's called It Is Well. I don't know who sings it, but it's just talking about like, I'm okay, you know?
Hmm.
So for me, that song just whenever I kind of need to pick me up or need to be like grounded, I'll put that song on.
Hmm. Favorite quote or advice that you may refer back to?
The best advice that I've probably learned, even through therapy, is just accepting. Like it's called radical acceptance. So it's kind of like when something happens or if something makes you upset and you keep thinking about it, is just saying, hey, like acknowledge your feelings, saying, hey, this makes me sad or whatever. And then say, but I accept that blah, 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 blah has happened and I'm going to be okay.
Hmm.
So I find myself using that a lot. So when I'll be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe my dad left when I was 12. Hey, it hurts, it was painful, but I accept that he's left and it's okay. So it's
Hmm.
kind of like a self-soothing tool that I
Yeah.
like to use.
Influencer that you follow that leaves you feeling positively inspired.
Mm, I really like, I think her name is Unbreakable Latina. So she talks a lot about like her first gen journey and everything. And I just like to hear like she'll bring in guests and stuff and just to hear their journeys. I like to hear of other first gen people because I know for me, I grew up, like I said, I went to private school. So during the day, I grew up a uh, very Caucasian lifestyle. And then, on the weekends, I was going to my Spanish church. So it was a very like double
Mm,
life.
yeah.
Um, and I didn't realize that there's so many other people out there that have the same experience as me. So I really enjoy listening to her podcast.
A feel good or powerful book or movie.
Ooh, so the latest book that I'm not a reader. As you can tell, I love TikTok because I love to watch videos. But one book that I am reading right now, and it's not necessarily feel good, but it's been very powerful for me, is called The Body Keeps Score. And so
Mm,
this book basically talks about how trauma affects the body, not only emotionally, but also physically, and how it can cause sickness and everything. And just, I think it's just so powerful because it makes you so aware, aware of not only how trauma can affect you, like in your feelings, but also like how it physically affects your brain. And so, sometimes when you feel out of control and you're like, oh my gosh, why am I acting like this? Like, no, your brain is literally functioning different because the trauma has affected it. So I think
yeah.
that book has really helped me, and I've been really enjoying it so far.
Mm. Super powerful. I was going to mention that in the beginning where you mentioned disassociation, but I
Hmm.
forgot. But yeah, it's so powerful how your body truly like shows you something's up, something has to change, you
Yeah.
know? And for you
Hmm.
it was like a very physical experience, I think, of like
Yeah.
holy, yeah, like something's happening.
Exactly.
I have one last one. It's fun questions.
Okay.
So, do you eat salsa?
I, d- I, I don't really like tomatoes like that, if I'm being
Okay.
really honest. And I don't like
Okay.
spicy things at all.
Yeah, see, that's why I'm like, okay, I need to switch it up because this is too, like, it's very Mexican oriented. Because my next one is horchata or Jamaica.
You know, you're gonna think I'm weird. I don't like horchata. And recently I tried Jamaica for the first time, and honestly, I thought it was okay. It wasn't, I'm just like really
Mid.
picky when it comes to drinks. Like
Okay.
I like acidic drinks like lemonade, orange juice. Like that's my vibe.
Interesting. What about Bad Bunny
Ooh.
or Daddy Yankee?
Ooh, Bad Bunny. I went to his concert last year and it was amazing. It was good.
Mm, dude, the energy at the concerts is crazy, huh?
It was crazy. Like I was in the playa section, so I was in the second row, and it was
Mm-hmm.
just the best night of my life.
Wow,
Yeah,
so
it was really
cool.
good.
Concha, well, do you eat conchas?
I think I've had them.
See, these were supposed to be controversial, but if you don't really like these things,
I'm a very
what
picky
about
eater.
pupusa?
Oh, I love pupusas.
Pupusa de frijol or revuelta? Is that controversial?
Revuel you could say pupusa de queso, de frijoles, revuelta, and I would say I'm a revuelta girl. Give me all three flavors at once.
Okay,
So
okay.
yes.
See, we customize these questions. The next one is what's your taco order, but we can do what's your pupusa order.
Pupusa revuelta without loroco. I hate loroco, so don't put that in there.
What's loroco?
It's like this green vegetable that they put in there. Some people love it.
Oh, yes.
And this
Okay.
is this is controversial, but I do not like called what's the
Curtido?
oh, I hate curtido. Get that out of here.
That is controversial. Even I'm like, what about
Latest
this?
news.
Just the salad? It's gonna come out on this. Stephanie does not like curtido. That's gonna
I
be
don't
my
know if
thumbnail.
I don't know if you saw, I posted a while ago. I posted a video of how to eat a pupusa, and
Mm.
literally everybody ripped me a new one because they were like, "That's not how you eat it." And literally, I'm not Salvadorian anymore, so
Okay, so how many? We need
oh,
quantities here.
I would say I would probably eat minimum three, max five. I can't do more than five. That's too much.
Okay. Okay, so three pupusas de revueltas.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Awesome. Well, that concludes our questions for today.
Oh, I love
But
chatting with you. It was
I
fun.
know. Is there anything that you would like to say to the first gen community that's listening?
Mm. I would say don't be afraid in the sense of in anything in life, whether it's therapy, whether it's getting a job. I know for me, when I started my corporate career, the fear that I had was networking and going to these events, feeling out of place, feeling like you connect more with the cleaning people than with your coworkers was so real. But then when I look back, I'm like, man, like thankfully I've been able to make it this far, but I was like, if you weren't afraid and you realize that you deserve to be there, then you probably could have gone a lot farther. So I
Mm.
think don't be afraid. And I know sometimes it feels like you're out of place, but you're meant to be there. So don't feel out of place.
Yes,
Yeah.
I love that. Oh, well, yeah, thank you so much, Stephanie, for being on the podcast, for your time, and for sharing. I think, we talked about a lot of important things, and it's always so good for people to hear other people that,
Yeah.
their story, what they're going through, and also like how they dealt with it, and to also not fear the process
Yeah.
because that's like, it's a hard process, but the reward is you feel like a superhero, you have your
Hmm.
voice, and you become a little bit more fearless, right? In
Yeah.
your journey. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you liked it, please share it with your amigas, amigos, amigues. And remember, First Gen, I love you, I love me, and I can't wait for you to love yourself. Bye.
Bye, everyone.